establishing this whole concept of Nazis in comic books, or the foundation of a lot of really popular comic book stories coming from Nazis or World War II era. And I didn't get as far into it as I initially thought I was going to get, right? We kind of got stuck right at Wonder, right when we started getting into DC. So I did about the first half was pretty much all Marvel stuff, right? It was really, you can go back and watch the episode, and it's really just about how Marvel gets into it. So we talk a lot about, Captain America, we talk about Namor, we talk about all the characters, why Nazism, and both the companies are kind of doing the same. So this is where DC really gets into it, right? And first, I think we need to say early on, before I forget anything, Superman wasn't as much directly a Nazi story, right? He really wasn't. But obviously he comes out in that same period of time. Like Superman himself comes out in 1937. I think we're fully at war with the Nazis. And he was directly an influence against Nazism, right? He's always 100% been that. That's actually one of the most significant cores of who Superman is, okay? But then as I was finishing up the last episode, I did talk very briefly about Wonder Woman, Diana Themyscira, and who initially comes out herself as an anti-Nazi. You can see this right off the bat, that you have her on the screen. You've got, obviously World War II. All of her modern episodes, even the films, I think the first one with Gal Gadot, it's really focused on the World War II scenario, all right? And I talked kind of extensively about how they would have portrayed her and what it meant for her to be in that scenario and why she would have been. Because she would have been anti-fascism. The way that she was raised, she would have been 100% anti-fascist. That's Diana at her core, okay? But as we get further into it, there are lots of other core characters that we're still talking about. Obviously, the Justice Society is literally, I think it's literally the first comic book hero team. I think it's the first team of comic book superheroes ever. I think that's where it comes from. Again, this is a story about guys who were, fighting against the Nazis. I think that's Black Canary back there, a couple of versions of the Flash, obviously the original Hawkman. So all these guys are tied in this. And the Flash specifically, like the early Flash, which is Jay Garrick, he is 100% a World War II era hero. This is 100% what he was. He represents science that's used responsibly, not ideologically, is how he gets his powers. And this is important because Nazis appear directly in Golden Age and later all recons. They're always treated as historically evil, right? They never play this as these guys were just kind of misunderstood, right? We never even get to that, right? That actually never happened. So they take a stance on the Nazis immediately and never kind of relinquish that, right? So there's a whole list of people that come out of this Nazi era, and one of the villains that we really like to talk about. Let me find this guy's picture if I can. I mean, this is a great one too. This is, if you guys know your comics, you're aware of this guy, right? In different forms, Vandal Savage, right? Vandal Savage, who is this immortal warlord. So he's conquered all over the globe throughout history at various points in times. And he always kind of represented Nazis. Now, he appears directly in fascist regimes throughout his history, and one of them, of course, includes Nazi Germany. So even Randall Savage comes in this realm. So they're treated as historically evil. That's how they really come at the Nazis. And Vandal Savage 100% has been doing this across the planet for years. So Nazis just become, in this regard, already fascist authoritarian leadership already exists in the world. They show that through Vandal Savage, right? And it kind of cements what the Nazi legacy is, because fascism itself will continue on past the Nazis, and we'll talk about that too. And there's a couple others. There's this pair, DeGaddon, who is, let me see if I can find this person here. This is another DC character that was kind of central early on in establishing, their view about Nazis and like what the comics would be. And the reason it's so important is because they still hang on to most of the core principles. Obviously, Wonder Woman is still a very, viable character. Still one of their most viable characters, right? I don't want that image on DC, right? And let's see if I can find one. This is a character they've resurfaced this character too. This is another character that comes out of this era. And let's get him up on the screen here, right? If it can. Let's see. Okay, so this character is a time-traveling Nazi collaborator. So what he does is he's always going back in time to try to change the outcomes for the Nazis. Like that's his squad. So, you see a lot of interesting characters, and this character appears now and I think it's in like the Arrowverse, right? So he's still a functional villain character that they're using a significant amount of time. So a lot of these characters have gone on to remain, part of DC's current, offering of comic book characters, right? So a lot of these guys coming from World War II era are still very, very much viable characters. So we see them used all the time. Okay, so another series you want to get into, because DC's not done. Some of the other properties that they bought, and they'll buy up a couple, and we're going to talk about a couple of these. Let's see if I can find a good image for you here of obviously a story that we know is deeply, deeply based on World War II is the Watchmen series. And the Watchmen series is great because it covers a lot of history, and it really does a good job of at least staying comic book accurate. So with the Watchmen series, this creates mass vigilantes. The Minutemen, of course, being the first ones, right? And this Cold War paranoia, so they slip from being the genesis of them being World War II. This is why you get the Minutemen and everything. This is like the genesis of it. The same reason that they start, the Justice Squad or whatever it is, right? In Captain America. They all come from that. Now, historically, what Watchmen does is they extrapolate that out into the Cold War propaganda. So we see it. So by the time we get to the Watchmen movies, they're really involved in Cold War propaganda more than anything else. That becomes a pivotal moment. Heroes are seen as state weapons, but without World War II, they never would have even developed any of this. So this is still coming out as a big part of World War II, this expression of mythology told this way. And then we get further, especially with DC, we get further into challenging authoritarian systems, right? And another one is, I'm going to bring this up for you here. Let me grab an image here. Is the theme of being fascist, right? Being able just to take over anyone and ruling with absolute just power, right? Without any regard for the citizenship, without any regard for, freedom or personal rights, things like that. And that's a thing that obviously comes from Nazis, but it's not relegated strictly to Nazis. It has manifested itself in all types of other cultures. And let me see if I can get to it here. And that is the New God story, right? The New God story. Where are you at here? The New Gods, which of course we get to introduce. Oh, that one's not going to show up here. Let me find that one here. Sometimes I'm grabbing these images and they're not want to cooperate. Wow, that one too. Okay, hang on, it'll be all right. And from the New Gods, though, we get a couple of very interesting characters. So their whole thing is how we get introduced into Darkseid, right? This is where Darkseid fundamentally comes from. Is the New Gods, obviously. And this is all about being authoritarians, right? 100%. There's nothing about what he represents that has any inklings for freedom or personal accountability. None of that. Personal agency. None of that stuff. So this is where we really start taking, what we got from Nazis in terms of, how we were going to tell these stories and really extrapolating that into, magnitudes. Where now we're looking at a character like Darkseid who is like, yeah, I'm taking over this entire universe. Everybody that's here is now being run by me. So this is where it really comes into. So he becomes like, Darkseid becomes really the manifestation of fascism, of totalitarianism. He's at the heart of it, right? There's nobody represents a totalitarian dictator more than Darkseid. And that's why they kind of use him. So it's kind of extrapolating, you know, it's kind of extrapolating out what we kind of would look at like a Hitler character is, where nothing really matters. Soldiers don't matter. You're not loyal to anyone other than yourself. You are 100% at the center of why all this happens, why all this murder and all this stuff happens. And this is 100% you. And he owns it. Darkseid doesn't run from it at all, but he is I think the most recent manifestation of, okay, how do we deal with talking about authoritarianism? And what does it really look like? You would think for a culture that's seen a lot of authoritarianism that we wouldn't be in the particular situation that we are right now, but somehow we are, despite all this content. So this is really where comic books, you know, we're seeing how DC has really been shaped by World War II as well as Marvel. And they do a couple other stories. They do some, you know, all the Earth X stories are based on if the Nazis won the war. Instead of it being the Allies, we're saying if the Nazis had won it, and that's basically your whole alternate, your Earth X. So the superheroes emerge under fascist rule. So it becomes very, very different, the types of stories that they're able to tell and how they're kind of putting a spin on it. They all feels like it's coming from the same world, and it really is. And even when we talk about like one of our favorites, right? Batman kind of sits at a weird. Batman is almost fascist himself, and they kind of don't hide it. One of Batman's really dark aspects is in the surveillance, right? This is where he kind of bumps up with Superman and Wonder Woman, because he's more prone to surveil somebody illegally. Batman is more prone to trample over people's rights than anyone else, right? We see it a lot. Now, it was weird because when Injustice really went down, he sided with, going against Superman. Like, they really flipped the roles. Batman was the one who was against authoritarian rule for the first time. That's why Superman was really shocked by it. Because, like, you violate people's civil rights all the time. Batman's all about surveillance. Like, he's making plans against and you have contingency plans against your own allies, right? Because that's how you operate. And when something goes bad, we don't really question, that Batman did this, but it is a big part of his character that Batman will 100% run over civil rights. Like, Batman really operates outside of justice. If you really, really think about it, I know he's got this relationship with the commissioner and all that, and what's going on in Gotham is just really an insane situation. However, we can't effectively say that he is not the most open-minded person in terms of like agency for people. He does believe in big surveillance. Something else that we saw in Tony Stark. So we're not surprised at either one of these guys, even though they work within the system, right, legally or surreptitiously, at least in the case of Batman, more legally in Tony Stark's case. You still don't fully grasp why. Like the personal freedoms, those things don't matter. So this is where we see that fascism really spread over into the site. But the big difference is between what we see between DC and Marvel is, Marvel kind of said that Nazis are evil and we're going to fight them forever. DC's approach is subtly different, and I think a little more insightful, that they say Nazis were a phase themselves, but authoritarianism is real. That's why we see Marvel has, Hydra still always going to be around. The Red Skull, like those characters are still all around and still, saying Heil Hitler, right? Whereas DC has made it a lot more, not abstract, but they've taken it on in larger ways. Okay, so now I want to talk about another character who's extremely popular right now in storytelling and in comic books, and this, of course, is going to be Hellboy. And Hellboy, obviously, is some very recent fame. I think our last Hellboy movie was only a couple of years ago, maybe 2 years ago or 3 years ago. But Hellboy's story is 100% a World War II era story. This is built on all the mythology that we know about the Nazis, like everything we know or mythologize about the Nazis, particularly all the stuff with the occult. And I think it was great. Like they really focused on the occult, and they were the ones trying to bring Hellboy over to be a soldier for them. The Allies were just fortunate enough to be able to figure out something was going on at that time and able to kind of interfere with that plan. And without it, it would be a whole different world. So there's all these scenarios around Nazis, but fundamentally Hellboy is a Nazi experiment. And they went as far as to add Grigory Rasputin, who of course is famously a Russian who is said to have all this like mysticism. So that was an odd pairing, being that Russia suffered greatly at the hands of the Nazis, but it really added on to the mystique of it, right? And what they do with this machinery that they build, because this is part of what, you know, Nazi Germany does, they're always going to be working with technology. They were pushing the envelope on technology, and we have to remember, for a long time, and maybe still now, Germans were considered to be the best engineers in the world. That's why we talk about German cars so much, right? It was all that stuff coming from Germany. It's just surprising they lost, really, with the tanks and the vehicles that they had. Like, it was kind of a stretch here. So what we see about Hellboy that's kind of different is Marvel and DC eventually kind of rebrand, or at least Marvel does. They rebrand the Nazis as Hydra, and that's how they go forward. DC kind of turns fascism into cosmic god, so they kind of soften the allegories. They don't directly say it, but Hellboy really flips its script. He says it a lot more. And there's another couple of characters here that come out of DC, and you guys may have seen this character. It's a great character. This is G.I. Robot. And G.I. Robot, if you haven't peeped out the Doom Squad, Doom Patrol, right? You need to check it out, because this is an interesting character, and what he is a robot who obviously was designed to kill Nazis, right? And he says it. He's explicit. It's the only character I've seen, especially in modern times, who's like, you know, he walks around saying, "Are there any Nazis to kill?" That's how hardcore this story was. I would love to kill some Nazis. Would you like to go kill Nazis with me? Like, this character is completely off the hook, but this is kind of, you know, so you see how much storyline. So the story is that he gets embedded in this, you know, platoon, active combat zones, you know, in World War II. I don't know what area, and probably in France, right, or wherever. And they insert him, and he just slaughters as many Nazis as possible, and is 100% happy about it. This actually brings him joy. He's actually sad when there's no Nazis around to kill, and he expresses that a lot. Are there any Nazis around? I was hoping to kill some Nazis. And, you know, he's, you know, both his arms are guns or projectile weapons, so he's ready to go all the time. But this is another character that is really built on hammering this idea of the Nazis were the greatest enemy of all time. And this is the foundation of a lot of the stories and comic books that you guys love to read, the ones that I love to read as well. I always do this, and I'm knocking my logo down, and I always like that right up here. So I'm gonna get my logo back up here. So Hellboy is again a big story that leads us to talk about this robot guy, and then we get into like even one of the best modern renditions of Nazis being around. And this is gonna be one of my favorite modern shows. And if you recognize this guy, you know we're talking about The Boys, right? Where you see these two guys right here, right? You see who we're talking about right here, right? Let's move a couple of these out of the way. Come on, ladies, let's get out of here right now. You're not. This is the main guy we're talking about. This is Frederick Vought. And obviously when we talk about The Boys, everything kind of starts off with Vought. It's Vought Industries. And, you know, I talked about their hierarchy. I talked about how they build the myth that goes along with the story. And they do a great job, like a brilliant job of setting up the beginnings of it. Like giving it this deep mythic background, all based in Nazis. So what happens in this world is this ties in with Nazi experimentation. This is one of the reasons, like, the Nazis did so much with experimentation and the occult that I think people will talk about them forever, right? So the World War II root is central to this story. You don't have this story without it being World War II and Germany and the scientists. So Compound V was created explicitly by a Nazi scientist, Frederick Vought. Vought defects to the United States after World War II as a part of Operation Paperclip. Now, again, this stuff is real. Like, they're hitting key historical moments on things that the U.S. actually did. We actually brought all these Nazis, these guys who have been like just experimenting on people. So America does not destroy the Nazi science; it absorbs it, and I think that's very telling. This says a lot. So this is about real history. This is like this ideology that is condemned, but yet the technology that comes out of it you want to take. And then, of course, that leads us into talking about, this lady here, Stormfront. Let me try to bring her up here a little bit. Because she is like, she is the modern Nazi. She absolutely 100%. She's literally the first successful compound V survivor, right? She gets immortality. She gets, flight. She gets, energy projection. She gets a whole host of things. So she has a long run. Like, she has an incredible run under multiple identities of being just an absolute white supremacist Nazi at the highest level. So she 100% reps it in the older times. She comes back, and it's still the same thing. Whether she's truly going, I don't even know, because I don't know if we fully understand her abilities. She looked like she was done. She looked like she died out, but hey, you never know. So Vought International here is the true villain. Like, it's profit over ideology and morality. They sell fascism, diverse. They'll sell whatever performance. So Vought's fascism doesn't need belief. This is more infrastructure. So then by the time we get to what they're actually producing, of course, what we're going to talk about the most is this cuckoo puff here. Let me see if I got the right image here. All right, let's grab this one. This cuckoo puff here, who is Homelander. Now, the interesting thing about Homelander is he is 100% a fascist. He is 100% for, I don't care about your rights. That's where he is, right? But he doesn't embrace the Nazi belief system. And we actually see him surprisingly reject it when, Stormfront comes up to him. But he is literally this super soldier, kind of stripped of all the racial language. He reacts the same way, but he's replaced like this nationalism with his own personal worship. He's not about representing, and it's funny because when she even says it to him, you remember that scene before, after Stormfront is badly injured, before she dies, they have this conversation. And she's like, no, you got to continue this. This is the legacy of, this pure race. And he flat out just kind of rejects it just because he's on his own stuff. He doesn't care about any of the stuff, right? But we see like a whole host of characters that come out of, the Nazi era, the Nazi way of looking at character, or the Nazi way the way that we told stories around the Nazis. Almost all of your major storylines way back from Superman, Captain America, Wonder Woman. We talked about Wolverine being caught up in this. We talked about obviously the boys. We talked about the robot, GI robot, Hellboy. So it's prevalent in so many storylines that I had to at least address it and kind of talk about like how this actually plays out and how it shaped storytelling. So this is our modern myth told through this whole idea of ancient mythology now developing this modern mythology. So we're well baked into it. It's clearly something that had a tremendous impact on culture and society, for at least for the West, and we reflect that all the time. So to me it's kind of simple math. Understanding why is probably the keenest thing, but it is about the fight between freedom and fascism, and the Nazis were always just the biggest representative of it. So that's what I'm going to lay out for you guys here. I hope you guys have enjoyed going down this like memory lane with me, talking about some of these characters and the representations of Nazis and how they like not infiltrated, but they're really the foundations for many of your favorite comic books. A lot of your favorite, most popular comic book heroes had some type of attachment to Nazis. Prince Namor, the original Human Torch, the robot guy, right? Like just a whole list of really impactful characters that are still running around right now that we're still seeing and films, right? Wonder Woman wasn't that long ago. Superman still as popular as ever. We don't see, Flash is like, now Flash obviously isn't the same era, but those characters that were established during that era are still around. Hawkeye, Captain America has not changed at all. And we even see, like, with the Winter Soldier, all those characters. I mean, Tony Stark's starts off all about, developing the super soldier. That bleeds into the Hulk. Without the super soldier formula, we don't get the Hulk, right? So we can see how far real Nazi ideas, real Nazi occultism has bled into, one of the dominant forms of cultural expression, which is comic books. Like, there's billions and billions of comic books. There's, hundreds of thousands of artists and creators right now who we don't even know about, who are writing comic books. So it's a very viable, very culturally meaningful expression, and I just want to focus a little bit of light on where all this comes from. So later on, I'm going to be back to running some mythology. So if you're into mythology, on your way home, you want to listen to something kind of mellow, check out some of the mythology, and I definitely got a nighttime read. But in the comment section, give me your thoughts. If you guys have any questions about any of the characters, or there's some specifics that you want me to go over a little bit deeper, I'm definitely down to do that. So I'm going to sign off saying what's up to the TikTok audience first. Be back with you guys soon. Yes, I want to end. And for YouTube, finally those guys are gone. So I hope you guys have really gotten into it. I've got some more info coming up on you guys on mythology, which of course is my main thing, the ancient part. But I love talking about the modern mythology as well. So until then, it's your boy Nine. This is the Lab. We'll be back tomorrow with something new.